All right, hey, it is a privilege to have our brand new coach, Kenny Dallas, on our podcast this morning.
Well, thank you very much. Nice to be here, and I think I'm officially 5 days in, and just super excited to be here.
All right, jumping into a brand new gig at a brand new school. What are the first things that you tackle as you're coming through?
Oh boy, everything's got to be prioritized, but I think everything is about relationships. So the first thing I did last week is I filled my calendar with as many one-on-one meetings as I could meet with all of the staff, the staff from this past year, all of the kids that are returning. I'm literally in the middle of 60-something one-on-one meetings with kids. But I think everything rises and falls on not just leadership, but on relationships. And so I'm just trying to meet as many people as I possibly can. And along the way, try to figure out what my email address is and what the school schedule is during the day. I was telling some guys earlier, I showed up for first period on the second day only to find out first period happens at the end of the day on Saturday. So I just told the boys, I said, you guys got to help me out. You got to teach me the ins and outs.
I remember when I moved from Boston to Savannah, it was a success. Like after 4 days, my wife said, how'd it go? I said, I didn't use Waze to get home today. So that was a win, I didn't have to get directions to say how to get home.
That's right. That's right.
So as you're jumping in on these relationships with them, what do those look like? Like what are you underscoring? What are you getting at with those kids?
Honestly, I with every one of our players, I'm doing a real simple deal. I'm getting together one-on-one with them to just simply do this. I tell them, I'm going to play a game with you that I play with my kids all the time, and the game's called Truth. I said, I'm going to ask you one question, and you can ask me one question. But we're going to both promise we're going to tell the truth. And so the question I'm asking every one of the boys is, if I were to truly get to know you as a person, what's the one thing I would need to know about you? And so it's great. It just opens up, and I'm sit there and I take notes on every one of these boys because listen, I think there is a key to every one of their hearts, and if I've got 6 of my own kids, well, I've got identical twins, and I know with one of them to get his attention, I all got to hit him with a 2x4 beside the head. And the other one, all I got to do is whisper in your ear a little bit like, I'm disappointed. And he would just wilt to death. So every kid is different. We have a standard. You have to create a standard that no one's above the standard, so to speak. But I believe there is a key to every kid's heart, and it takes some time to kind of figure out that, what that is. And so that question, that lead-in question is important. It's also interesting to me. I'm kind of take notes on what's the question that he asked me. Some of them, it's about football. Some it's about relationship. Some of it's about scheduling. So it's that to me also gives me a little insight into who they are as a person as well. So, but that's been a lot of fun, and it's going to probably take us a week or two to get through that. But it's a great process.
Without using any names, have you had any answers or questions back at you that were really intriguing?
Man, I'm going to tell you, our kids are so impressive. They're just across the board. I told Shannon, I said, I've enjoyed every single one of them, not to make it too just all rosy and all everything. But our kids are incredibly impressive. And the vast majority of our kids say, to know really about me, you've got to know my family. You've got to know how important that is. And I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So right now, what are some of the toughest challenges for you as you're jumping into a new gig?
This job is different than any other I've ever taken in that it comes off of a championship year. Mm-hmm. Every program I've ever taken over, and there hasn't been a ton of them, but I've worked at a few schools. Everyone generally has a coaching opportunity because some bad stuff has gone on,
right.
Yeah. and therefore things need to get fixed. And so every job I've taken, there's been this great optimism of Coach Dallas is going to come in and he's going to fix, you know, and we've been fortunate to do that. I've played in a state championship, I think, in my last several schools that I've been at. This one is so different because I'm following one of my very good friends, and Hebron just came off of a football state championship, but God has just given me such peace and clarity of knowing this is where I'm supposed to be. It's interesting. I told Shannon, my wife, I said, I almost feel like a younger coach who's coming in, having to prove myself to a few guys rather than coming in like, oh man, he's coming to save us.
Right.
You know, it's more like, who is this guy? Right. You know, and is he who he says he is? And so I've been trying to tell my story to all of the boys and all of the coaches here. And I'm going to tell you, this is kind of a side note, but I mean, every staff member that I have met here is just such an incredibly impressive place. Every day that we were here last week from Monday through Friday, it just felt more and more like home already.
That's awesome. As you're looking at the transition with kids, let's talk a little bit about that idea. You've got Zach coming through in ninth grade.
That's right.
Be a sophomore next year, but he's already started this year.
That's right.
And then you've got a beautiful daughter
Ellie.
who's coming through.
That's
Ellie,
right.
Who's going to be a senior next
That's
year.
That's right.
Tell me about kind of how that works as a dad. I know we've got the big old coach's hat on, but let's put that dad hat on for a minute. And
I'll tell you, without going into all the story, because it's a long one, but part of my decision in coming here, you know this, is when I was originally offered this job, honestly, I declined it. And it had nothing to do with Hebron, because Hebron's just beautiful and unbelievable. And it was there's so much attractive about it. Obviously, I'm sitting here today. Mm-hmm. But, you know, over about 9 or 10 days, God just kept knocking at my heart a little bit, Hebron, and talking to my wife. But what happened was, you know, I asked you, could I bring my entire family up over that weekend? And look, I've got 6 kids, and I think I've joked with you before and told some other people, if I go Waffle House or Chick-fil-A, it's going to be hard for us to decide, make that decision. But I brought my entire family, all of my kids up, spent the day, prayed up here. Even you allowed us to spend some time alone by ourselves, even in the building. And the next day I asked all of my kids and my wife and just everyone, what do you think? And every single one from the youngest to the oldest said, Dad, take this job. This is where we're supposed to be. And honestly, hearing my daughter, who is beautiful little 11th grade girl, she's going to be one of the leads in the spring play. Who knows? You know, you going into your senior year, all the stuff you've earned, the opportunities to do, to hear even her say, Dad, 100% take this job. It wasn't a burning bush, you know, experience. But for me as a dad, it gave me all the confidence in the world. This is the right thing. My entire family, so including Zach and Ellie.
You know, it's interesting. Both of us live very public lives. Mm-hmm. For people who don't live public lives, they don't fully understand just how much you give up with that. Yep. You give up anonymity, you give up so much with it. When my family, this is only my 3rd school, when my family moved from our first school just south of Boston to our second school in Savannah, Georgia, that was a big school. That was a big transfer. It's a big transition. It kind of feels like a different country in many regards. But it sunk down into my kids' lives, and you and I have talked about this already, but it sunk down into them this DNA of faithfulness, where you just say, when God calls and you know that it's God's voice, you go, period. Doesn't matter whether things are hard, whether there's some additional challenges, whether there's some big old fat question marks on what will happen, what could happen. It's this idea of this DNA of faithfulness. And I'm so eager to see in the lives of your kids and the lives of your family to see, man, what is the fruit from that?
Yeah.
You know, how will that make them even more courageous?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I will say, I think you know this, we all know this, like what kids I think are looking for is an authentic, real faith, not something fake. Like they want to see actual freedom in Christ, and people who are living by purpose. There's passion and there's power that comes out of a purposeful life. And so I do pray that, you know, that my kids see that, and we're doing this together.
That's right.
We're doing it. It's not just part of why I needed to hear from them is I told them, you have a walk with Jesus, just like I have a walk with Jesus. And that's why I don't know if I told this part of the story. I did not tell any of my family members what I thought, yes or no, until I first heard all of them. And so again, when they went around the entire circle and every one of them was 100% positive. In fact, one of my sons at one point, because I actually shared, Dr. Taylor, I actually shared with them, I said, here's my fear. I have no fear of myself. If I get knocked down, I can get up and go get to work and find somewhere else. And I'm fine. My fear is that I would do anything to harm any of you. I know you're in a good situation, good environment. We love where we are, you know, that type of thing. And one of my sons actually said, Dad, if you're making a mistake, we are all making a mistake. We have all heard the exact same thing. And so there was just clarity. Now the question after you have clarity is, do you have courage?
That's right.
Like, will you obey?
Yeah.
Will you follow through? And if there's one thing I want for my children in life, there's a great verse, Joshua 1:9. It says to be strong and courageous. And I used to think, courage is the virtue upon all which all other virtues are built off of. But I used to think, that courage was the absence of fear. And then I realized, no, actually, that's probably stupidity. Like if I'm not afraid of fire, that's dumb. And then I thought, no, it's action. Like it's the facing of my fear. But if you go on and you read that verse, actually, you get into those words of strength and courage. It's kazak and amatz. It's the idea of knowing that God is with me wherever I go. There is this, I heard a man once describe it as a heavenly audacity a man can have about his life of truly believing, yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I will fear no evil because he is with me. Mm-hmm. To be strong and courageous because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. If there's anything I want to pass on to my children and to my players, that God loves them in such a way that they can trust him and they can walk with some heavenly audacity.
That's right.
Of knowing I might be uncomfortable and I may even go through trouble. In fact, in his word, he says, there will be trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. Therefore, I have some heavenly audacity about myself.
I challenge dads. I challenge particularly Christian dads with this mindset. One of the greatest gifts we can give to our kids is to wrestle well. Mm. And what I mean by that is to have a Christian father who says, hey, I actually don't know the answer to this thing. I'm going to leave a school that I love, where we're settled, where things are pretty good, in good shape, where we care about them, they care about us. I'm going to do all of that to go to this new place. And honestly, to let our kids see us wrestle well, to let them see, hey, my dad's been in the Word over this. My dad's been on his knees over this. My dad is consulting the advice of the people who he loves and the people who he trusts in his life. Like, I think about how that will impact the 35-year-old Zach or the 35-year-old Ellie, who will also have the opportunities in life to wrestle well. And now they have a tool in their toolbox on what that looks like.
Well, and the question is like, am I about advancing the kingdom or am I not? Right. Is that one of the highest priorities of my life, or is it something I talk about? And so, man, no, I appreciate that question, and that wrestling has happened. I've also shared with my kids. We actually were together for a big birthday party this past weekend. I've kept in my phone great confirmations that God has given me. I think I'm up to like 25 on my little list, but it was a sweet time with them this past Saturday or Sunday, whenever we did that birthday party, where I was reading to them some of my confirmations, and I was like, this is the goodness of God.
Yeah. And kids go through their lives thinking, my dad's got it all figured out, particularly when you're living such a public life like this, because they see you up front. They see you leading. They see you doing these things. They think, oh, well, he's got everything marked out. And it's so important for us to know that we don't have to have things marked out. We just have to know the one who has it marked out.
I'm going to tell you, my wife sent me, I don't know if you know who Adrian Rogers is, great pastor from years. Actually, it's where I was saved in Memphis many, many years ago at his church. But my wife, I was wrestling with some stuff with this decision and everything, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, and she sent me a great little sermon by by Adrian Rogers. And it was basically, his description was this: fear is just forgetting God. He was like, now listen, you can have concerns and your antennas can be up, but fear is not from God. He gives, power, love, and a sound mind. He does, and so don't forget God. That's Remember right. God in this. Now, and it's just amazing how that works.
I think it's one of the greatest advantages of being a true follower of Christ. I say it all the time that my bravery is borrowed. That my bravery is not through me. My bravery comes from a Savior who sent, who was willing to go to the cross for me.
That's right.
So that I inherit that kind of bravery in my relationships. It's one of the greatest assets that we have, one of the greatest benefits we have of being a follower of Christ.
That was kind of the entire point of that strength and courage, Kazak and Amatz. It was my misunderstanding that I must face my fear. But our flesh, which is our body, our thinker, our feeler, and our chooser, They have limits. And if we face enough life, we'll come to the point where our flesh was not strong enough, it wasn't smart enough, or the will couldn't get it, or the heart couldn't feel it well enough. But that's not with God. You know, the whole point of that type of bravery is I'm trusting in him.
Yeah.
You know, and that's an unlimited type of deal.
100%.
So,
we're excited to have you here leading. We're excited for how you're leading with Christ at the center. We're excited about seeing how you relate to your beautiful bride, Shannon, how you relate to your kids, all of the different components of what that looks like. I'm always intrigued when I see a leader who neither one of us are 22.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
We've got a little bit of experience under our belt.
That's right.
Tell me about some of the most influential guys in your life.
Oh, man.
Who have really developed you, and why?
Oh my goodness, what a great list. You know, I would have to start as a little kid, as with my grandfather. You know, I grew up in a great situation where I spent a lot of time at my granddad's house, who was a boxer in World War II in the Navy, and was a lifelong fireman. And so when I look back on my life, I just know every time he saw selfishness, he was like, that guy's going to get somebody killed. He was all about teamwork, but he came from a military and a fireman background where you had to have each other's back. And so it's so funny. What I love about coaching is team building. I love figuring out, how do we make 1 + 1 = 3? How do we get all of these different folks all together and get them going in the exact same direction? That to me is, and I think a lot of that came from him. My dad, growing up with my dad, and we had our relationship was, my mom had me when she was very young. She was 17. My dad was 18. They were divorced by the time they were 20. And so there was some separation there, in that I lived about an hour away from my dad, but Christ so redeemed our relationship at a certain point. My dad is he's my mentor. He's my best friend. He's you know, even though there was some difficulty growing up kind of in a divorced home, but I learned from him the power of always begin with the end in mind first. I mean, he just taught me, fast forward your life to the end. What matters on the last day? And whatever matters on the last day, that's what matters on this day. That's your finish line. Now run your race today for that. And so that has always helped me so much, of just keeping in mind what truly matters. Look, money matters, but actually money only matters in terms of my relationship with the Father, with my family, and the impact I've had on other people. So even that, like, it just puts things in perspective. And of course, there's a million other things that I've learned from him. My greatest relationship growing up was with my brother. He was 12 months younger than me. We played sports together my whole life. He lives in Memphis. He actually has 3 boys that play college baseball. Right now, he's got a boy at University of Memphis and a boy at Wake Forest that pitches over there. And so, man, loved, you know, growing up with him. Then it gets into, I guess, even a little bit further into my coaching career. Actually, probably the greatest coaching impact was, I met a man years ago named Fred Yancey over at Briarwood Christian School, and I never played for him, but in my first year or two of coaching, I shared with a guy, I so badly want to both challenge boys to become godly men, and I want to win. Like, I want to do both of those, because I've known plenty of people who are like, not people you would want your kids to be around, and boy, they could win, but they're going to MF
Right.
and GD, and they're going to, like, that's not what I want. You know, that's not how I want to coach. And then I've met plenty of people who are like great men, you know, pastors, youth ministers, but they don't know anything about football. And then this buddy of mine, he said, I've got somebody that you've got to meet. And we went over to Briarwood Christian. I mean, this was a guy who, he won 5 or 6 state championships in Alabama. And honestly, for a young coach, I think there was about 10 years in there where I visited him once or twice a year and really became a massive impact. But he was the first coach that truly had a Christian worldview, but at the same time, there was nothing about performance that lacked. I mean, he was excellent. He wasn't a great Christian football coach. He was a great football coach, but he didn't curse, and he didn't demean kids, and he didn't. But there was no like, okay, he's good, but for a Christian coach. And I loved it. And honestly, as a young coach for a while, I used to joke with my wife, you know, like, what would Jesus do? I was just like, what would Coach Yancey do? You know, that was kind of but it's interesting. One of the greatest impacts on my life was a man that never actually coached me, but he most certainly mentored me. That's awesome. And of course there's all kinds of other great men, but just you asking that question, those are the men that just kind of jump off the page.
And I've mentioned to you that's now where my son teaches. So
incredible.
He's a math teacher at Briarwood Christian.
That's right.
That's fun to see kind of how that's full circle.
Amazing. It's an amazing place over there.
So we think about different leaders who have impacted you. How about experiences? Are there certain events in life
absolutely
that have shaped you that you recognize that was just one of those crossroads moments?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that jumps off at me is, look, I'm 52 years old, been married for 31, going on 32 years. I got married when we were 20, but I've been going to school with my wife, Shannon, since 6th grade. We've known each other literally forever and all but literally forever. And we started dating our junior year in high school. And I say about Shannon, the only bad thing I can say about Shannon is she shouldn't have been hanging out with me probably my junior year when she started. But I'm sure glad she did. But I mean, that for me, that relationship outside of choosing to follow Jesus, I mean, just, a profound experience was my relationship with her, because I mean, she didn't directly lead me to the Lord, but she most certainly did, in her walk with Christ, and massive experience. And so I'm with her even after I graduated high school. I'm going to play. I was on full football scholarship and also trying to play baseball. And she takes me to a little event at Bellevue Baptist Church, Adrian Rogers, a little 4th of July celebration. And at this 4th of July celebration, there's a gospel message. And I'm sure I'd heard the gospel many times before, but that night it was like one guy was listening, and it was me. And I remember it was like, raise your hand if you want to be saved, or raise my hand, be baptized. I surrendered to ministry. I raised my hand for everything. It was like, I heard it. I tell people, I don't know if God called me to ministry, but I enlisted, that night. And I mean, that night obviously changed everything for me. But what's interesting is I then kind of thought, okay, this means I got to get a check from the church. And so even while I'm playing college ball, I kind of started working at a little church, and but it just didn't quite exactly jive. And so I reach out to 4 or 5 men that I really respect. I sit down with them, and at the end of that conversation, all of them told me the same thing. You need to go be a high school football coach. You want to challenge boys to become godly men, and you love coaching and you love whatever. And so it gave me the freedom to understand, okay, I can serve God and not necessarily have to get a check directly from the church. And doing that, the last experience that kind of all relates to me being here today, I guess, is I'm looking for my first coaching job, and I just fell into a private Christian school. Honestly, I wasn't looking for it. I graduated from the biggest public school in Memphis. I was looking at public schools. That's all I kind of knew. I had no experience. And I got a job at a tiny little Christian school that wanted to start a football program. And so I jump in there, and I remember I'm my first week on the job. You're kind of going through in-service. Everything is new. And I'm reading about the philosophy of Christian education. And it says something like, there is a strengthened council of voices, that verse we're talking about. And it says, a child will hear the exact same thing at home and at church as they hear at school. And it was like a light went off for me. We didn't know how many kids we'd have. We didn't know we'd have 6, but we knew we'd have a big family. And I remember calling Shannon that day, and I told her, I said, I might forever be in Christian schools. That's what I want for my kids. I want my kids to hear the same thing.
That's right.
At church and at school and at home. And it was powerful impact. Here I am 29 years later.
Yeah,
and in private Christian schools.
So as kind of the listening audience is going to be able to hear you and get to know you a little bit more, you mentioned Shannon all the time, which I absolutely love. My bride Karen is the center of my world as well. Yeah. I love kind of hearing how you talk about how you're still crazy about your spouse. Nothing better than that after 3 decades.
Yeah,
I don't know whether you and Shannon experienced this at 30 years, but I know that when Karen and I we're on 32. And when we hit 30 years, we had a lot of people like, tell us the secret of it. So hey, if you were going to give advice on marriage, What might be the best advice you'd have on living out a happy
Oh
marriage?
gosh, I have terrible advice for people. Have 6 kids, and so you got to get back to back
broke
to survive.
Yeah,
that's right. Have absolutely nothing except for love. Oh gosh, my goodness, what a great question. I could just say this, like she's God is the center of our relationship. And I think Colossians 1:16 says all things were created by God and for God. I've just told all of my kids, I don't believe kind of the idea that you meet somebody and they complete you, or the 50-50 thing. I said, I think what you're looking for is somebody who knows they were created by God and for God. Mm-hmm. And you put them together with another person who know they were created by God and for God's purpose.
That's good.
And I just think there is an opportunity for a healthy, whole relationship. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be whatever, but I know she has my back. I know I have her back. And there's no one else I would rather do life with. And then now you throw in 6 kids. I was headed to school one day, and I heard on the radio they did a study, and they said those who have a lot of kids and those who have kids later in life live longer. And I was like, Shannon, we're living forever, baby. Like we're both hitting 100 because we nailed both of them, you know. But no, that's and I'm so proud. I'm so proud of my kids and what all they're doing. But life is hard and life is complex, and I can't imagine doing it without the type of relationship that I have with Shannon.
That's great advice, though. You look for that person who is wholly committed to Christ.
I'm going to tell you what, Shannon didn't need me. Like when and I know that kind of sounds odd. It was one of the things that when we were juniors in high school that attracted. Her cup was full. Her identity was in Christ. Yeah. And so we talk in my house a little bit about, we have these cups, this love, acceptance, worth, and security. There are emotional needs that everybody has. And if your identity is not full in Christ, you're a bit of an emotional beggar. And so she was not an emotional beggar. Mm-hmm. She was good, you know, and there was something about that. And I think, you know, scripture speaks that when our cup overflows, like people are blessed out of the overflow of our lives. And so I don't know, she was different, and that, you know, her identity was fully in Christ.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great advice for people on spouses. All right, I'm going to take the same thing. 6 kids. Now, I have not met all of them at this point in time, but I will at some point in time, I imagine, this year.
Yes.
I've not met all of them, but the ones that I've met, listen, I'm pretty impressed.
Thank you.
Young people who exude confidence. Yeah. I can always tell a kid who's confident that they can look at an adult and they can speak to them and they can communicate. Yep. They're not terrified by them. You know, they shake your hand with a firm handshake.
Yes.
They look you in the eyeballs. And so you and Shannon have done a great job with your kids.
Thank you.
How about some parenting advice?
Oh boy.
What do you think on that?
Oh boy, parenting advice. You know what? I received some great advice early on in life. My very first job, there was a little farmer that would come around in his overalls and a beat up pickup truck. And of course, everybody always whispered to me, he's worth $1 gazillion. Don't let the overalls and the beat up pickup truck fool you. But I remember him coming to me and he just said, when your kids are young, he was like, enjoy them, take them everywhere. He said, if you're on your tractor, if you're cutting grass, if you're going to the store, he said, because one day when they get older, you're gonna want them to be your friend. Yeah. Now, they don't need a friend for a long, long time, but he just said, I just remember him telling me, you're gonna have to earn the right to one day get to be their friend one day. And it's interesting, we had some mentors in our life many years ago who kind of told us, okay, when your kids are young, it's gonna be physically hard and emotionally easy. And then they're gonna get older and it's gonna get physically easy and emotionally hard, you know, because they could take care of themselves, but now really they're out of the house. And so I think for us, the one thing I think Shannon and I have really tried to do is enjoy every one of our kids in every stage of the life that they're in, but also kind of point them to the idea, like we're trying to train them up in the way they should go, not necessarily trying to bend them to I use this example all the time. I've got identical twin boys and they could not be more different. You know, they're so similar in so many ways. And so I just think there's a key to every kid's heart. I kind of talked about that a little bit at the beginning by having individual meetings with our players. And I think there's a key to every one of our kids' heart. But I know this, I think we've truly enjoyed our kids as much as we possibly knew to enjoy. And I think you always look back and you go, man, I wish I'd have known more then what I know now. But it's all you can do at the time. And then I'll be honest, I tell dads all the time that I talk to, I was like, man, don't be afraid to tell your kids, I'm sorry. I just screwed up.
That's right.
I think that's important for our kids to understand. I think every dad is painting a picture of God for their kids to see. It's an imperfect picture, but it should be an intentional picture. What we really want to do is point them to Jesus.
That's right.
We don't want to just point them to me. We want to point our kids to Jesus. And I think we have that opportunity to do it. The last thing I would say is my kids have just been completely involved with what I do. I think I've told you before, I think Shannon is my secret weapon in building programs, in building community, in building trust amongst people. And we just do life together.
You know, as I've seen you relate with your kids. In mine, my kids are both grown, Alyssa and Colton, and I'd always say to dads, you know, most parents love their kids. You have to like them too. Like, you know, I just like being around my kids.
Yep.
Alyssa married a fantastic guy named Ryland. They've got a little baby, Emily. Colton married a fantastic young lady named Ella. They are just doing life down in Birmingham, and it's just awesome to love your kids, but also to really like them. That when we get together, we just love being together. And I can tell the same thing with your family.
I tell people, it's funny, me coaching football, and it's one of the things that drew me to this. I read something that you wrote of, this is not just our profession, it's our calling. I read that. I'm like, I say that all the time to people. But funny for me, coaching football, it's more than that. It's actually my hobby. Like, I've tried to play golf. I've tried to fish. And I like those things. But coaching football and being with boys, it's like, it's my hobby on top of it. But really what my hobby is, I can do anything in the world if I'm with my kids. I'm playing pickleball now. I try to get on the dumb Xbox or whatever Zach plays, and I get on there and they laugh at me and they kill me doing that. I'll do anything that my kids are doing to kind of get to join in on life. And I'll tell you, the one thing I've really had to fight over time with my 6 kids is I would love to control their lives where they don't have to make mistakes. And I think that one thing, because growing up, I saw the effects of sin kind of in families and in things. They've just grown up. I've told them, I said, my one concern for you guys is you've grown up in God world. Like, we go to church, like we pray at home. You go to a great Christian school. I was like, oh, I want you guys to see enough of the world to understand when you reject his ways, there's consequences that come with that. I don't want you to just think everything is blessing and everything, you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And so the one thing, and I think every parent has to do this to a certain degree, all of our kids are going to have their own individual walks with God. Some of that is going to be probably making some bad mistakes along the way. And just knowing this is part of their testimony. This is part of their life. How do I walk them through? And so one of the things Shannon and I try to let our kids know is one of the ways we know the difference between Jesus and religion is when we screw up and we mess up, we run to Jesus. We don't hide from him. And like, we want you guys to do that for us as well. Always come to us, you know.
Great advice. Great advice. Let's talk about you've written a book. There's a whole program that you guys work with. I'd love for our people to learn a whole lot more about that. They're going to learn a whole lot more about it here, but I'd love for you to introduce kind of what you guys are doing.
Well, one warning about my book, it is proof that literally anyone can write a book. So my respect for authors have gone way down once I saw my name on a book right there. But it's interesting. I went through a pretty challenging period of my life about 13 years ago. And it was a tough time about 13 years ago. Probably a lot of men can relate to this. I left a job and it was fantastic, moved to another state, and things did not go the way I expected them to go. It was a great place, great thing, but it was just, I went through a hard time and kind of struggled. Out of that time, it's interesting, I needed not just accountability, I needed some real transparency in my life. I needed somewhere where I could get with a group of men and just be honest. Like, I have fears, I have worry. Like, there were things inside of me as a leader I didn't feel like I could say to anyone. And it really revealed something kind of about me of like, yes, we all need someone to have our back. Men are not meant to do this life alone. And so it's interesting. Out of that came this idea of honestly, it's like a support group for dad. I call it AA for dads. And it's kind of like you go AA, you go, my name's Kenny Dallas, I've got a problem, I need help. Well, here it's like, my name's Kenny Dallas, I love my family, I want to honor God, but it's hard to be a dad. And it's a place of transparency. It's like a support group for dads. So we started this about 10 years ago, just for the men of my church and our school and our community, with no idea that there would be anything that would come of this. But about 10 years ago, we just kind of opened up on a Friday morning, a little bit like you guys do, Band of Brothers. And we just said, who wants to be a better dad? Who needs some guys, who needs some guys to support them, to become better dads? And so we opened it up at 6:30 in the morning at the school I was at. And I come in there the first day and the room is packed. And then for the last 10 years, the room's been packed. The interesting thing is the place that I was at, the youth minister at the church was a guy named Mark Hall, who's the lead singer for Casting Crowns. Yeah. And so he'd come for a few months and he comes up to a certain point. I was like, Kenny, this is incredible. What's happening? He said, I've been in youth ministry for 25 years. By the way, all of their songs, Casting Crowns, come from actual things in ministry. And he just said, all I do as a youth minister is I pick up the pieces of broken relationships between dads and kids after the fact. He said, I've never had anything proactively to put in their hands to help prepare them. He said, there's plenty of things to learn how to be a godly man or how to be discipled or whatever, but how do I practically become a better dad? So the mission of M46 Dads, is what we call it, is to inspire and equip fathers to be able to fight for the hearts of their own kids. And so our little tagline is fight for their hearts. And the whole idea is a dad should be the primary discipleship maker of his own home. So we're going to inspire and equip. By the way, M46 is a reference to Malachi 4:6, and he will turn the hearts of the fathers toward the children and the hearts of the children toward the fathers. We believe it's a principle of what the gospel does. And actually there's a reference in Luke, again, of it's part of what the gospel does. And so it's really simple what we do. We do once a month, we come together and we have one image, one principle, one scripture, and then we leave with one challenge. And it's super simple, but the power of it is men are empowered. First of all, maybe they come in a little bit of crisis mode. Maybe they just need some guys to kind of walk alongside them. They just need somebody to have their back. And so we say we inspire and equip. Sometimes guys just need a little inspiration. Mark Hall used to say it this way. Everybody makes fun of kids going to camp during the summer because they're on a spiritual high. He goes, most adults I meet, they could use going to camp during the summer and have a spiritual high. But, and so some guys, we're walking with them. With other guys, they just need equip. We say this, a dad, if I go to do a job, the only tools I have are the ones in my tool chest. Generally, the ones I have in my tool chest are the ones my dad gave me. So he didn't give it to me. I just probably don't have that tool. So every month we just say, all we're going to do is give you one more tool. That's all we're doing. And now this month, the challenge is to now go use that tool, whatever that is. And there's a variety of it's a super simple concept. Well, we've been doing it for a while of where we're at. And every month there's guys there and it's impacting and it's making a difference and guys are having testimonies. And Mark Hall just comes and he says, Kenny, this has got to be outside this church. And he introduced me to a few people and we meet for a while for, a bunch of meetings with focus on the family. They almost took it, but they were already in the middle of a big project. And so David C. Cook picked it up and so did a book and did a year one workbook. And we're actually in the middle of a season 2 and a season 3. We're actually right now, we just finished actually writing season 4, which season 4 is a little bit different because it goes at this slant. It says, one of the greatest ways I can love my children is to love my wife. So season 4 takes a little bit of a turn. It goes from me as a dad to one of the greatest things I can do as a dad is to love my wife. And so, the goal of this is really to let God do with this whatever he's doing. And so we have little crashes that are now popping up. Those are our monthly meetings. We actually use the image of a rhino. That's a whole nother story. But like last month or two, we had a crash pop up in Tennessee. We had one pop up in Pennsylvania. And so it's pretty cool to see God using this. And literally all it was is a buddy of myself who got together and said, men need this. You know why? Because I needed this. And so we tell people all the time, this is not a parenting class. It's not a Bible class. It's really a support group. So we say, this thing is about failure. It's not about success. It's about, I've got to learn how to trust Jesus and to help me be the dad we want to be. So we give this little image where we just say, the day you become a dad, God puts this figurative paintbrush in your hand. Every action you take, you are painting a picture of God. Now, it's imperfect, but it needs to be intentional. And so that's kind of what we do.
That's awesome. When you say a crash popped up, what does that mean?
Okay, I'm sorry. So we use the image of a rhino for M46. And the reason why we use the rhino is 3 reasons. Number one, this rhino is this massive creature. If you look at any data you want to look like, honestly, it's not Republican, Democrat, it's not rural city, it's not high income, low income, it's daddy or no daddy in your life. And people can get frustrated with that. They can do whatever, do all the research you want. Every data shows, do you have an intentional dad in your life or do you not? And it's not that can't be overcome if you don't. Men can step in the gap for that. But it's, you go look at all the data you want, from education to poverty to crime to everything. So a rhino is this humongous creature. Number two, a rhino can run 30 miles per hour, but it can only see 10 yards in front of itself. So it's like, it has this armor plate and this horn, it's going to mess up. It's going to screw up every once in a while. So we tell guys, though a just man falls 7 times, he rises again. Failure is a part of this dad process, and it's going to happen. And then the last thing is, a group of birds is a flock and a group of fish is a school, but a group of rhinos is called a crash. So our monthly meetings are crashes, not meetings. And it has that kind of a double effect. Imagine the impact can be good or bad, and so imagine a community of men who are intentionally fighting for the hearts of their kids. And so again, our men, every month we come together and they're going to leave with one tool from God's word, a principle from God's word, one image that helps them remember it, and one challenge to go and do and apply it. And so it's been a blessing. Been doing that for 10 years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to you bringing that to this campus. It's going to be a lot of fun to see. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So let's come back to football.
Yes. Yes.
I really wanted to kind of, have people get to know you and understand who you were as a man and as a leader, as a dad, as a husband. Let's come back to football. What are some of the big plans that you have for the program?
I'm super excited to be here, and super excited at the assets that we have, the kids that we have, the coaches we have. But right now, what I'm doing is I'm a defensive guy, special teams guy, kind of by nature. I tell people all the time, coming in behind Coach Guest and I are very, very similar in some ways, and we're very, very different in some ways. We're very similar in some ways that matter, in that we want to point kids to Jesus, and we want Jesus to be the absolute center of the program, and we want to prepare, practice, and play to win. Those things are absolutely in the same, but there are some differences where he was more of an offensive nature guy, I'm a defensive nature guy. So for me, like even hiring our offensive coordinator is a big deal. Getting our staff in place. A staff is so important. I believe everything rises and falls on leadership, and so it's tough to find men who can not just be great coaches, but they have to be great mentors. I tell our coaches every year, I start with the same question. What would profit a man if he gains the entire world and loses his own soul? What would it profit us to win state championships and lose the souls of our kids? Like, we're not going to do that. And so we must, number one, honor God. And number two, we're going to prepare, practice, and play to win. And so right now I'm in the midst of building that staff, getting all of that staff together so I can communicate that out, building our spring practice schedule, our summer practice schedule, and get ready to go attack this thing. I told the boys the other day, I've played in 7 state championships in the last 12 years. I said, so it's been a pretty good run, of a high level competition. But I told them they just started playing in the bins, just last year. I was like, you boys, y'all gonna have to show me around that place. We're gonna have to go play, but I've never been down there. Y'all gonna have to show me around. And so we're just super excited to get started.
Yeah, it was big being there. It was just a ton of
beautiful.
Fun. Yeah, and it's just remarkable to see when you're there are teams that are like season teams. There are teams that are preseason teams. There are some teams that just are postseason teams. Like they are guys who are still kicking it on all 8 cylinders, even into, because it can be a real marathon.
It's a long. I had a coach many years ago that I learned from, who said, you either have to see your season as a 10-week season or see it as a 15-week season. And you can't train the boys and treat the boys exactly the same. If you want, and I'm just telling you, I think a lot of postseason success comes down to how many of those boys want to keep playing football in November and December.
That's right.
How many love it still and are dedicated. And so I think you've got to be careful, and you got to have a 15-week mindset.
Yeah, and I know that you've done this just because I've seen all your stuff, but I love it when a coach comes through and when they're putting the calendar on the, out for everybody. Championship games on the calendar. We are planning to be in that championship
100%.
game. Yeah,
100%. And as I said, a 15-week mindset. I mean a 15-game mindset, because of course the season actually starts the second week of May. When you go to spring practice, and then you go all the way through summer. And to be quite honest, you're training. We have 3 strength and conditioning coaches in the weight room. It just blows me away. Coach Arnold and those guys, what they're doing down there, it's unbelievably fantastic. So really, our kids are training all 12 months. There is no downtime. But as far as getting back on the field, you're back on the field the 1st of May and you go till December. That's a long time, and so you have to have that mindset.
That's right. And you have to come in with it.
100%.
You got to walk into the season with the mindset of, this is not a 10-week. This is not a 10-game. That's
exactly right.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
Coach, listen, it is great to have you here. I really feel like I've found a real co-laborer, and man, it's neat. My kids are going to listen to this because you said tools in your toolbox, and my kids are always making fun of me for saying tools in your toolbox. So they're going to be like, hey, I could see, cut from the same cloth. So, but listen, Coach, really and truly, it's great to have a guy who you can step in, and that you're going to talk X's and O's. But most importantly, you want to talk about who Christ is. You want to talk about how you love your family. Coach, we're just so glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Taylor. And I will say this to anybody who's listening. I hope you will come out on Friday nights this fall. I hope you'll come out and see us. And what we really want to build is a true community. And I'm not just talking about 9 through 12. Part of why I came here is I saw a real opportunity I could invest in somewhere K through 12. We want to build a program where our kids start in kindergarten. They start in our little flag league, kindergarten, first, second, into our tackle football in 3rd grade. But we don't want to just develop kids physically. Obviously, what's happening here academically is second to none, but we want to develop their spirit. My goal is for us to build a program here, K through 12, that every mama and daddy within shouting distance of this place, within driving distance, would just desire for their boy to be here, because we're going to develop them spiritually, mentally, physically, social, the whole person, so they can succeed in life and be able to attack life.
It's one of the greatest benefits of being at a K-12 school, where you have the privilege of being with them right from the beginning.
100%.
You get to see where that kid, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, and really to develop that student.
I could not be more excited about that and the opportunity of that. But I just envision Friday nights being all about Hebron community. And I just want to challenge everybody to come out there and be a part. And we all have our biological family, but we spend so much time with our school family. Certainly our football family, we spend so much time with each other. I just, it could be a very, very special place. And I can't wait to be a part of it.
Cool. Coach, we're looking forward to this season. And listen, we're looking forward to the next 5, 10, 15 years ahead.
That's exactly right.
Us doing ministry, doing life, and training up young men and women in the way that they should go. So, Coach, it's great to partner with you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, brother.